And now, Hollywood Prospectus.
Yeah, we making it for the camera, yo. We making it for the camera. We wasn't really scared.
Hello and welcome to the Hollywood Prospectus podcast. My name is Chris Ryan. I am a writer for Grantland.com. And on the other line in Gordita Beach, it's Andy Greenwald.
Happy New Year, buddy.
What's up, man? That's the New Year noisemaker I just did.
I thought that was like a New Year raven that you sent from Winterfell that you then accidentally stepped on.
Woo! What's up, man? So here we are back in 2015. Glorious New Year.
Yeah.
The takes, they've been cooking over the last 2 weeks.
Ooh, they've been baking in the oven.
Andy, we wanted to just slip into the hot tub of culture by just like talking a little bit about what we did.
So gross.
Culturally, not like personally. Nobody cares about that stuff. But what did you learn over your Christmas break?
If there's something you want to talk to me personally, I care. I'm here for you. This might not be the ideal setting for it, but I want you to know that I'm here. What did I learn culturally?
Yeah, what did you do? What did you come away with over
in
these
the
last
waning
2
days?
Yeah.
Oh man, wow, so much. Where to begin? I learned that it is not restful necessarily to travel with a 19-month-old. Rewarding, probably not restful, especially if that 19-month-old isn't your own.
Oh yeah.
Just kidding. Detour.
Broadchurch season 2.
It's all mine. Okay, here's the thing that I really wanted to talk about that I learned. As many people out there bubbling in the cultural hot tub know, our friends at HBO remastered The Wire for HD. And then in order to celebrate that, they broadcast a marathon of it on like HBO 12. Mm-hmm. And I paid that little attention, and except then I was flipping channels, and I stumbled onto the very end of season 5. Now, I know what you're thinking, stumble away, right? Because the conventional wisdom on the greatest show of all time, The Wire, is that it basically muffed the landing, that the 5th season was the weakest season.
Yeah. And
in the time since that season aired, which already is ridiculously, that's like 7 years ago now this year, which is very hard to believe. I think that narrative has gotten stronger. And in fact, when I've been talking about it, 2 things have happened. One,
when you talk about it at the bodega, or when you like
listen
at daycare.
The guy who sells me gum has very, very, very strong opinions about Pryzbylewski's arc. But 2, no, I mean, it comes up because, I mean, I don't know, we haven't talked in a while, but I mostly write about television.
No, it does.
For my
I feel
career.
like The Wire, like, is sort of like, you know, The Wire was sort of like in terms of like the conversation topic heat map, like has not been blooming. So it was so interesting to see people going nuts for it.
Right.
It was great. I mean, it was so great just to see those characters again and in glorious high definition.
Well, this is what I wanted to say about it. I realized 2 things. One, this 5th season, not so bad. Not so bad.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not watching it in the moment, and I think that it was impossible, first of all, for any show to, I mean, no show has ever had a run like seasons 3 and 4 of that show. And so the 5th season was almost bound to disappoint. The 5th season was also shortened. It was 10 episodes instead of 13.
Was it shortened? Do you remember why it was shortened?
Well, I think it was more like they went to HBO and HBO went to them and they were like, well, I think we're probably done. And HBO was looking at the ratings and they were like, yeah, we think you're probably done. And they agreed for budgetary reasons or whatever they needed that 10 episodes made sense. I don't actually know.
Didn't he do an interview, Simon, where he talked about season 6 would it have been Carcetti?
No, he said that had they done a 6th season, the only compelling idea that they had was about immigration. And was going to focus on bringing a whole Latino element to the show, which had not been there, and illegal immigration in Baltimore and workers and things like that. But I think he said that ultimately they never felt that was either their story to tell or they had an angle on it, and they decided to put a cap on it.
Yeah.
The journalism part of the other thing that dominated the conversation about season 5 was the journalism stuff, which really seemed like the strawiest of David Simon's personal grievance straw men. And the serial killer plot. Now, when you're watching it in the moment, I remember those things jumped out at me because they felt so just kind of incoherent and out of sync with what had come before. Watching it now, those parts I'd seen them. They didn't move the needle. What I saw, what I had missed the first time was some truly incredible stuff, like the resolution of the Bubbles arc, for example.
Yeah,
the complete turn 180 of Carcetti's New Dealism, basically, and what happens to Daniels because of it. Even the end of McNulty and the end of his sort of warped alcoholic idealism. It was incredible. It was so moving to watch the show again, particularly the end of it. And here's what I have to say to you, Chris, here on the record in front of only our friends. Like, yeah, I consider everyone here our friends. It's the best show ever made. And I know that that's a hot take, but I actually had talked myself out of it over the last few years.
Had you talked yourself into something?
I had started to think that, and let me preface this by saying this does not matter. Right. It is great that we have had so many phenomenal TV shows. I'm thrilled that we get them all, and I'm really not that into saying X is better than Y. But that said, I had been talking myself into The Sopranos and Mad Men as being some way better because they were so much more artfully written, or more written, let's just say, and also more. There's just more interiority and emotional stuff that I tend to like in writing, and I like TV, and I certainly like to proselytize for that kind of writing on TV.
Sure.
While talking myself into those shows, I think I kind of talked myself out of The Wire, because what I remembered was that sort of heavy hand of David Simon in the newsroom in that last season. What I forgot was the totally outrageous beauty of the show and of what he was able to do with characters and how, and I'm going to turn it over to you, I promise, get off my high horse here. There's a moment in the season 5 when two characters are sitting on a stoop and no one's saying anything, and you just hear the crickets, and it's a hot summer night on the East Coast. Nights you and I, we know those nights.
All those crickets.
And all you hear is the crickets. And I was thinking, there is more vibrancy and four-dimensional life just in this quiet moment with the crickets than there is in the entire runs of some series. And I was just blown away by it. And so I am just telling you all this now. This is how we begin a year of really timely hot takes.
Yeah.
Like jumping in the Wayback Machine. But I was pretty blown away by it, especially because it caught me so off guard.
That's really interesting. It's funny to hear you talk about the sensation of rewatching something, because that's sort of what I wanted to talk about too, with what I learned over Christmas break. But I just briefly on The Wire, that's fascinating that like you kind of went back to that season and found a lot of value in it outside of that sort of thresher that it got thrown into when it first came on, and how that was very much like one of the first because what was the timeline of when The Wire ended and when Lost ended?
Couple years apart. Wire ended in 2008 and Lost ended in 2010.
Okay, so I mean, I guess they're not the same thing, but it does feel like we've been talking about endings for almost 10 years now.
Yeah.
Which is pretty interesting.
And I don't think anyone really argued that the last moments of The Wire, the images we see of people and the cyclical nature of characters, where we're not really spoiling anything, so I won't say names, but how one person clearly takes up the mantle of a previous character who is no longer with us, and basically nothing ever changes, and it's sort of presented in this kind of beautiful, almost inspirational, uplifting montage, except it's crushing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
where does McNulty take that homeless guy?
Well, he's north of the city. He's somewhere else in Maryland. No, he's in Virginia. I think he's in Richmond or something.
Right.
And then he drives him back.
Yeah.
And even that's just kind of an incredible idea.
I remember that.
But this last season, these last few episodes, there's the Bubble stuff. There's Marlo saying, "My name is my name. This is what happens to cheese." There's the McNulty wake, even though he's alive.
Oh yeah, that scene is incredible.
I mean,
when they play "Body of an American."
Yeah, and all the cops are singing it.
Yeah,
it is an incredible show, and it's one thing I get. The only other thing I'll say about it is we generally, we are spoiled as cultural consumers these days because there's so much excellence, and I think it's so easy to forget or to sort of talk ourselves out of the idea that TV is essentially an imperfect medium. There really, unless it's like maybe a 8-episode miniseries or something, there nothing is perfect. It's impossible, and you sort of forget that so there were those hiccups in that last season of The Wire, but that's nothing in the grand scheme of things. If you think about entire half seasons of The Sopranos, that you could basically ball up and toss away. It's it was almost more charming because of the imperfections.
I'd be interested to see what other people thought about like what stuff jumped out, whether it was a reevaluation of season 2 or maybe I would be curious to see what it was like to watching season 4 again, because I just remember my skin feeling like it was on fire while I watched it, because I was so uncomfortable with like the prospect of anything bad happening to those kids, you know?
Yeah, and what was amazing about that for The Wire was because this was a show that basically introduced itself with its first season with the idea that, oh no, terrible things are going to happen to kids.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, that was basically one of the things that shocked everyone who was watching it. And you were in on the show early.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth. I mean, I still think season 3 is my favorite. It might be my favorite television season ever.
I think it's the best.
But yeah, man. So like, speaking of rewatching things, I weirdly saw The Gambler twice in about 36 hours.
That's just weird, man.
Yeah.
Most people in America have seen it 0 times in hundreds of hours.
I got back from Philly and decided I just didn't feel like sitting around my apartment, so I went to go see it at ArcLight, and it was like one of those things where I went and saw it by myself, and I needed other people to go see it with me to verify what it was that I had just witnessed. So I just went again with a couple of guys from work the next day.
Wait, so what did you walk out of the theater the first time thinking?
That was terrible and amazing. That was like a very mishandled, clearly re-edited, clearly like movie done by committee movie where, you know, like plot lines just sort of turn out of their spin at the last second, or the edges of characters get sanded down, and some characters, I mean, there's like really weird stuff in here, man. Like Andre Braugher is in one shot. He literally says to him, like, you need to clean up your act, and like also make sure that this guy passes English. Mark Wahlberg, for anybody who doesn't know, Mark Wahlberg plays a gambling addict English professor at a UCLA, USC type school in Los Angeles. He's the scion of like a very rich Californian kingmaker guy, who's his grandfather. So there's some family money around. Jessica Lange plays his mother. And for reasons that in the film are unclear, he starts this sort of downward spiral of gambling addiction and self-destruction that culminates with him having to, you know, outwit and pay off 3 wonderful gangsters played by Alvin Ng, Michael Kenneth Williams, and John Goodman, who he all owes money to. So I go back and I see it again, and the guys I go see it with are all like, yes, that's an incredible disaster / miracle. There is like a 6-minute scene where Mark Wahlberg gives a lecture about Camus.
Sure.
There is a scene where Mark Wahlberg gives a lecture about authorship controversies, of Shakespearean authorship controversies. John Goodman does the majority of the film topless.
Well, I mean, that's in his contract.
There's some weird music where like the music will be really cool. Like John Bryan and somebody else did the music, and there will be like a song playing, and then like the song will just end in the middle like of the song, and like for no reason in a scene. Like there's just like weird, like I don't know if that was a licensing thing, if they just thought like, we've heard enough of this song, let's turn it off. There's the entire like sort of climax of the film hinges on a like what then winds up being a 15-minute college basketball game in which a nameless California college is playing their quote unquote conference rivals, Michigan.
Sure.
And
so basically, I wrote it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and then there's just like a lot of like, I think the secret to this movie is that, you know, I hate to end it, you know, I don't want to spoil anything, but one of the sort of more notable lines in the movie is Wahlberg saying, "I'm not a gambler," and he's not, because he literally plays he gambles like a cat shoots pool. You know what I mean? Like he'll just be like, double it, put it all on red. Oh no, I'm down $250,000. Like it's Mr. Short-Term Memory guy from Saturday Night Live. But it's fascinating. You can't look away from it. It's very literate. It's got like incredible William Monahan, who wrote The Departed. It has like these incredible speeches, and it's awesome. I downloaded the screenplay because Paramount put it up for your consideration, you know, stuff. And in the screenplay, there's all this stuff like Wahlberg's character leaves his wife and infant Like, and comes back and is just like, but you're not allowed to have a new boyfriend because like, and it is like, you know, there's just dark stuff like that. And like, there's a scene where he puts a gun to his head and, you know, which he, you know, metaphorically is doing the entire film, but like it's explicitly suicidal and dark, and he's a bad man. He's like not a good person. He's not really in our traditional ideas worthy of redemption, quote unquote. And I'm fascinated with this idea that Wahlberg did this movie and sort of, you know, he produced it, and you have to assume that a guy who is as prolific and as successful as Wahlberg has a lot of control over the final product of the movie he makes. He obviously like wanted some of this stuff out of there because it wasn't for time considerations, because there's lots of things in this movie that just don't need to be there.
So you think he walked it back at some point?
I think that I don't know whether they shot that stuff. I mean, there's more stuff about, like, Brie Larson plays the love interest.
How is Brie Larson?
She's like a blowtorch. Like, I can't believe how good she is. And like
she is so good at acting.
She has so little to do in this movie. Like, she basically has to like raise her eyebrows. And there's one time where like she's flirting with Mark Wahlberg and she says, "I want you to take me to a restaurant." And it's like, you just like pour your popcorn out over the person in front of you's head. You know, like it's so flames, but it's fascinating to see the differences and see what he took out. And, you know, there's a sort of infamous Deadline.com post from 2012 that it's basically Nikki Fink being like, "I got an email from James Toback today." And James Toback is the guy who originally wrote the original 1974 Gambler. It's a very autobiographical screenplay. It starred James Caan. It's even darker than this one. And Toback is writing this email to Nikki Fink as he's heard about the remake of The Gambler being put into the works,
right?
Living in Brett Ratner's house while he's on his 22nd draft of a John DeLorean biopic. And it's just this vision of him, like, with his shirt half open, like with like tons of pictures of John DeLorean and like an old Remington typewriter. Like,
and family photos, the Ratner family Christmas or whatever.
22nd draft. Yeah. And then Ratner apparently tells him, like, "Did you hear they're remaking The Gambler?" Now, when they were going to, the original sort of idea here with the Monahan script was that this was going to be a Scorsese and DiCaprio bit and vehicle. And the Wolf of Wall Street version of this movie is something that I would cut my left hand off to see.
But instead, they were like, you know what? No Scorsese. Get me the guy that did Planet of the Apes.
Well, here's the thing, is that, like, I thought that Planet of the Apes was pretty decent.
There's no really,
and the weird thing about it is that they left in some of it. They left in some of the weirdness.
Some of the apes?
No, but like, there's no 6-minute monologue about Shakespeare and Camus in Planet of the Apes. Like, there's things in here that aren't in your traditional mainstream.
But it got, so you're saying it's a tweener. It
is a tweener, but what's fascinating about its tweener is what stayed, what got excised. I'm curious why. Now, the amazing thing about these Wahlberg bits is just like in the classroom is, and I don't mean any disrespect towards him because I really, really like Mark Wahlberg's writing movies, like, for the most part, but this dude definitely learned these like scenes using a mnemonic device. Like it is definitely like he is like phonetically sounding out like Camus, and they're still great, but you can't help but wonder what if somebody who was like a little bit more bookish, like a Ruffalo or somebody
bookish,
well, you know, like a guy who maybe wears the old arm patch, the elbow patches on a corduroy blazer a little bit more comfortably than Mark Wahlberg.
So you in 2003.
Sure.
Is what you're saying. Do you know that one time I wrote a scene in a script that was like a big high stakes poker game, and I was like having so much fun because there's nothing more fun, like few things more fun to watch on screen than a poker game.
Yeah, sure.
Like, it's really exciting, and one guy knows he's bluffing, the other guy thinks he's bluffing. You don't know, and
there's
it's just
like a
pure
45-minute poker scene in Casino Royale.
Right, it's pure theater, and it's very, very entertaining. And I wrote the scene. I was so pleased with it, and I shared it. I think I shared it with my agent, and he was just like, "Oh, that's cool. It's a cool scene. It's very funny, and it's a great reveal." And he was like, "There's one problem." I was like, "What's that?" He's like, "You clearly have never played a single hand of poker in your f***ing life." He's like, "Those are just fundamentally not the rules of poker." I don't know what game that is.
What was the hand that won?
I don't know. I was just like, royal double flush. I was like
hearts.
I was like naming McDonald's value meal things. I was like, double McRib.
Yeah. Nuggets, baby.
It was so, but I like really, this is, I also had like creative momentum, but I was also doing some just very, very light Wikipediaing about rules of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know,
that's kind of like my Vietnam War screenplay.
That's right. That's right. I guess what we're saying is,
It's like exterior Vietnam War.
Exterior, the country of the island nation of Vietnam. And someone's like, nope.
Interior casino gambling establishment.
That's what it was. And it's just like men in tuxedos drink cocktails while women wear earrings. It's like, look,
How are we not famous screenwriters?
It's overrated getting these details right. What you want is a vibe.
Yeah, chill out, Sorkin.
You can sort out the details later. You can hire some sort of professional card
That's
player
really
to
not
tighten
true
it up.
though. Everybody says that. It's like, yeah. I'll get all the like minutia of this armed robbery down at some other point.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
Well, look, no, someone told me who worked on a medical show once, a medical TV show, they have like a doctor on staff because they're all dying inside. No, because they need the details. So they'll basically write like, well, this character is having heart trouble because it's a metaphor for romantic trouble. And so this person needs to have something done. So they'll literally write in the script, medicine, fixes medicine. And then they show it to the doctor and the doctor's like, looks right to me.
Can you imagine like if you and I wrote an ER script from like 98 and it was just like, dude comes in sick. Carter's like, what? And then they put a thing on his arm and he's like, got you.
Carter's like, get me the hot towels.
get me 10 cc's of lidocaine. And it's just like completely spelled wrong. And it just
get me 100 cc's of Tylenol. Yeah, look, that makes it more interesting. This is all actually, despite what our remaining listeners may believe, a pretty good segue into an actual film we've both seen that we want to talk about, because it's interesting to talk about there's the idea of interesting failures, what makes something interesting, things that don't quite work.
I'm very intrigued by your setup here, because I asked you what you thought of this film and you did not tell me.
Well, I know I told you the truth. So we're talking about a film called Inherent Vice. And
hopefully by this point has gotten to more cities than Los Angeles and New York.
Well, it's iffy. There was actually just something just went across my transom saying journalism, saying that it's actually not getting an expanded release.
Really?
Because they're just kind of like, well, we tried.
So really?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think it's playing in some places, and I think it's probably not going to be playing in that many more places. So we're going to talk about it. Feel free to jump around and join us when we're done talking about it. But you asked me what I thought about this movie, and I told you the truth, which is I have no idea.
Okay.
Now, let me preface this by saying there is no worse way to watch a movie than the way I watched Inherent Vice. Absolutely no. I cannot imagine a worse way to watch it. I received a screener of the film. So I watched
due to your lauded gambling screenplays.
Yeah. Well, once people saw what I could do with a high stakes table in Monaco, they were like, just give him everything. Just give him everything.
Here's Star Wars Force Awakens.
Just get him into the club. So I have a screener of this film. You don't want to watch. First of all, you want to watch all movies on a big screen if you can. But I think some movies in particular should be seen that way. Like I was happy when I saw Gravity in a theater. If I'd seen it on a TV, I think I would have thought it was bad. Mm-hmm. P.T. Anderson movies are beautiful and huge, and so I wish I could have seen it in a big theater. I did not. Not only that, as I mentioned, maybe as I alluded to before, a little tired these past few weeks. So couldn't quite make it through the film, which is even worse and embarrassing.
You didn't finish it?
No, I did, but not the night I started it. Okay. Which again, I broke every rule in watching it. So it was a suboptimal viewing experience. I will say that.
I had the exact opposite viewing experience.
You were wide awake. Well, you had 16 red eyes.
I went to the New Beverly, which is a movie theater owned and more or less operated by Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, you mentioned the story, yeah.
And I went and we see, one of the cool things about that theater is that Tarantino allegedly chooses the trailers you get to see beforehand. So we saw we all sit down. Everybody's been there for a while because, it's like a lot of anticipation for this. It was like a couple of nights before the official release. And PTA walks in. And he goes up to the front and he's just like, thank you for coming. Like, there's another movie after this, was like Groove Tube, which is some cult thing that I didn't stick around for. And he's like, I've seen Groove Tube. I've seen, obviously, Inherent Vice. I'm here for the trailers. I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you enjoy the fact that we're watching it, in in film projection, not digital. It's important to keep this art form alive.
Throwing shade at me.
I know. And then like a girl spilled her Diet Dr. Pepper, and PTA was like, "Oh no, you spilled your soda. I'll go get you another one." And that was it. Then he was out. Like he got her a soda, but then I didn't see him again. Then so we just watched a 10-minute Cheech and Chong cartoon and a trailer for Top Secret and a trailer for The Long Goodbye, the Robert Altman version.
One of my favorite movies.
Inherent Vice was just. It was a great experience. So I had the exact opposite experience to the extent that it matters in the end.
Fun fact: a girl in my apartment did spill a soda, but that's about the overlap.
Okay.
Okay.
Did you read the book?
No.
So I think that's a useful thing to mention in the beginning, which is that I have noticed in a sort of loose straw poll that book readers to non-book readers have been having different experiences with the movie.
Did you read the book?
I did.
Here's my takeaway from it. I thought there was too much book in my movie.
Okay.
What I mean is, this seemed to me, and I'm curious your perspective on it. The script seemed so respectful of Pynchon's words and characters and world rhythms that it choked a lot of the life out of the film. You know, I'm willing to accept the fact that this was intentionally a very meandering, sort of digressive, druggy exercise. I get that, and there are a lot of aspects of that are cool. I mean, The Long Goodbye is kind of like that, and that's an incredible film. But I think if anything, I thought the movie aired on too much of that, because the voiceovers, Joanna Newsom's narration, I just thought added very, very little. And the seeming need to tick boxes of all these fantastically named characters who show up for very, very brief one-on-one scenes. Obviously, I'm not the guy to talk about momentum in this film, since I intentionally disrupted it. But I felt like it was a movie that definitely could have used some. Even movies like The Master, which A to B to Z don't really track with any previous knowledge of how movies work, had it propelled on its own sort of intent and dementia. And this movie seemed to be borrowing the high from someone else.
Well, I obviously, I mean, I disagreed. I understand what you're saying, and I can understand why, if you didn't read the book, you might feel like you're only getting like half of a joke and not the punchline or something, you know, like as if there's like somebody, like if you sat next to somebody who read the book and they might chuckle a little louder than you do, and you're kind of like, I don't really understand what the point of, you know, say Benicio del Toro's character is or whatever, or like, you know, why is it necessary that he has a funny name and everything? I think when you read the book and you get caught up in this sort of the Jenga tower that he builds of all these different characters and scenarios, and just this quagmire of a plot that's like, I don't think meant to be understood really.
No, and let me just jump in and say I love that. I mean, one of the things that I really, really loved about the movie is that maybe Long Goodbye is the only other movie that ever did this. It really has a lot of fun exposing the secret truth at the root of any good detective story, which is the plot is ridiculous.
Right.
Plot does not matter. Plot is just the engine of the car, and it's just really about where the car goes and what you see along the way. The fact that Doc Sportello, basically every single person he encounters during the period of the film is engaged in some level of conspiracy and subterfuge about the same thing, is, you know, that's what that's
that's the big sleep. Yeah, of course.
But it's also the big lie at the bottom of all these stories that you and I love. And I really liked that. I liked the way the movie was sort of stunting on that.
So I think I've seen a couple people, especially before it came out, mention that this was like PTA's Big Lebowski, and that was sort of a cousin film to it. And I get that, because there's a lot of pot smoke in Los Angeles in it. But the thing you see in Big Lebowski is all this space. You know, there's like these sort of languorous shots of people in bowling alleys, or like guys making themselves drinks or doing exercises in the morning. And like, there's a lot of like air in that movie. And in this one, there's none. It's like if despite its running time, it is so compressed. It's so verbal and dense, and also like fast talking, and lots of characters show up, and sometimes characters come back and sometimes they don't. And sometimes, all right. I mean,
that's that scene. The Owen Wilson, Joaquin Phoenix whispering for 5 minutes scene.
Dude, I thought that scene was incredible. You didn't like that? Oh, my God.
That was the worst scene in the movie.
And that's the one that they think Pynchon's in. The guy walking behind them in the glass.
Oh, I was going to ask. I wonder if anyone had determined that.
That's the educated guess about where his cameo is, if there is one. Who would know? this film is like, it almost has the sensibility of like a screwball comedy from the 40s more than it does something like Lebowski.
I kind of wanted a little bit more of that. Maybe that's unfair. I think that P.T. Anderson is probably the best photographer working in movies today. The images that he makes, the way he composes his shots are just breathtaking. And some of the shots in this movie, particularly just the world that he creates for this book, for this character, for this film, are totally astonishing. And that scene of Doc Sportello walking up to the police station where he gets jostled and knocked over, and the physical comedy of that, but also just the way that it's composed and the rhythm of it. I mean, it is absolutely unparalleled. If
we had done the taping of The Wall at a different time, we did that the last year with or recently with the sort of like our favorite people of 2014. Yeah, Brolin would be on there.
I was about to bring up Brolin. Brolin's performance is he gets, maybe we should do this every week. He gets the Flames emoji award of the week because he is turned up in this movie and he is so good.
I think that the thing you see in a lot of PTA movies that seem, and sometimes this rubs people the wrong way, is that the actors in those films make definitive choices, and you may not like the choice. That's why Joaquin is sort of.
I want to talk about. Let's circle back to him.
He's sort of the perfect PTA actor because like he commits to an idea and a way of being in the movie, and you may get tired of it. You know what I mean? I did not see Sportello as that dude in my mind when I was reading the book, and early on there had been rumors that Downey was going to do it.
I was going to ask you about that.
And
what would we have thought of the Robert Downey version?
Totally different movie because Sportello is verbal, but he's almost like you can see him sort of piecing it all together very slowly through a haze, whereas Downey is like a switchblade and you can't retract him, like he is, once he's out, and it's sharp, and he's always sharp, and no matter what. Yes, I think that's why he's just kind of like resigned himself to playing these characters, because that's his gear.
But it would have been so interesting, because I think the thing that is revealed by Joaquin Phoenix's performance, that is brought out of Joaquin Phoenix, or that he brings out of himself, or that P.T. Anderson chooses to accentuate, there's a deep sadness.
Yeah.
He's so sad about everything at the end, and not at the end, but as the movie progresses.
I think he's sad about the loss of the dream that was the late 60s.
Yes, and I think that in the post-Manson world, that actually does sum up the emotional arc of the film, I think, in a smart way. That said, I think I'm tired of him. I think I was exhausted by this performance. I think that his performance of the Master was exhausting in a different way. It's like watching someone run the 100 meters 20 times in a row. It was such a physical performance. I think his transformation into this, it's remarkable that any actor could do.
Did you see
the Master, her, and this in a relatively short time span. Sidebar: how old? If I were to ask you how old Joaquin Phoenix is, what would you say? What do you think? How old do you think he is?
38.
Okay. See, after watching this movie, I was like, man, he must be close to 50 now. He was 39 when he filmed it. Like which totally surprised me for some reason. But
so anyway, I was just saying with the idea of committing, like Joaquin is like that's like an all or nothing gambit. I defy you to find somebody who doesn't think Josh Brolin is just blacked out in this movie.
And a lot of people were. Our girl Reese. We talked about this in the Wall pod. Her in that scene when she finally just lets the real Reese out. Just great to see her do that and be that person.
Did you like Catherine Waterston?
I was interested by Catherine Waterston. I wasn't sure. That is such an odd part to play. One thing that I appreciated about it, I think, is that when she has a very indistinct look, that when you first see her, you're like, oh, she's a waifish teen, runaway teen almost, but then you realize she's actually the femme fatale also. She herself is in her mid-30s. Even though she looks and the character dresses like someone much younger. So I thought that was effective. I don't know. What do you think of Michelle Sinclair?
Who's that?
That is a pornographic actress who plays a large role in this movie and shares a scene with Paul Thomas Anderson's wife.
Oh, yeah.
Which I just feel like, what's the dinner conversation like in the Anderson home? Like, here's this actress that I really admire. I've really been a fan of her work for a long time. Great, honey, you make your movie.
It's not that surprising.
But that's like telling someone, I used to make movies like that, but now I make arty movies about Scientology.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, it's a cool conversation.
I wanted to just shout out, you were talking a little bit about The Wire. What I was thinking about when you were talking about The Wire earlier was just about how that show, despite the commercial limitations probably and the budgetary limitations I'm sure they were existing under, managed to create such a deeply immersive world. And you mentioned like the 4 dimensions of that scene with people sitting on the porch. And I think that that's something that Anderson does almost without rival now, which is just create this entire universe that these stories are set in, and all the locations and like the way that people ate and what they were eating, and like, you know, the beer cans, the decor, the clothes, like everything felt like that sun-baked after the great night, like morning after for an entire city, you know, and it was so perfect the way it was like rendered that way. I love the music. I can't wait to see it again. Yeah, that opening scene when she gets in the car and then Can's vitamin C starts.
It's perfect.
Yeah, it's incredible.
There's a Twitter account that's like One Perfect Shot. And like it'll just tweet out images, and I was thinking of that constantly when I was watching this movie because there were a lot of them. Here's the big picture thing I wanted to say, because like I said at the beginning, my experience of this was massively flawed. I need to see it again. That said, I think it really, I would be surprised if I came out of future viewings thinking anything other than the fact
like
that
I got it wrong. Yeah.
No, I would not that I got it wrong, or that there are things that I missed appreciating, but I would be surprised if I emerged from multiple viewings changing my opinion that this might be his weakest movie. But here's what I wanted to say about that. First of all, he doesn't make bad movies. He doesn't make uninteresting movies. So take that as you will. But I was struck by where we are as a entertainment culture in which it's so hard for anyone to make ambitious movies, whether they succeed or fail. And the fact that P.T. Anderson, by the fact that, you know, the career that he's built up, the friendships and relationships that he's made, and the munificence of Megan Ellison, the daughter of, you know, billionaire Larry Ellison, is able to make this 3-hour rambling head trip. Mm-hmm. But the pressure that then goes along with it, because we expect a masterpiece from him, because they certainly do, because they're bankrolling this movie that's going to lose a lot of money. So they expect Oscars or some sort of artistic rate. I don't know whatever benchmark Megan Ellison uses. She can write it off, but whatever. But I think we also get so few of these movies and we have so few like great directors who are able to keep making movies that maybe we expect too much. Like when you slot this movie into what I hope will be a very long career, people are going to be drawn to this. They're going to be talking about it. It's going to be a weirdo. It's going to be an oddity. It's like The Long Goodbye in Altman's career. You know, it'll have a resurgence. People will champion it as his best. But in the moment where we are, where we're starving for anything that's artistic or ambitious, it's just the whole system seems kind of skewed, and it seems sort of unfair. Like what I wanted to say is, like we were saying about the Gambler, we should be thrilled about audacious failures, but I don't think we're really set up as a cultural consuming economy to appreciate them or accept them.
Well, I think that we have a little bit of like we've all become a little bit too sensitive to the endangered species sort of theory of like, sure. Not even a theory, but just sort of like when you see something like Whiplash, you know, and Wesley Morris talked about this in his year-end essay, which was sort of like how Whiplash should be a $50 million movie. That it's the kind of movie that if it got any kind of release, it would have, or advertising, that people who watch NFL would go see it, and you know, people would go see it on dates, and our parents would go see it. You know, my mom's been dying to see Whiplash, and the idea, but we get a little too like worried, like these movies are in the ICU. I think because they're so few and far between. So I do think that you're right. There is an undue amount of expectation put on these films, but I have to admit that it's part of the fun. I mean, like I know what it feels like on the other end of that thing, where it's like nobody's really expecting this new Michael Mann movie to be that good. I don't think. I mean, but there was a point where Michael Mann 20 years ago was probably one of the 2 or 3 best filmmakers in the world.
Yeah, I guess the other part of it is... And it's like, so the other side of that, when the people aren't expecting very much to it, and it'll probably come out, it's coming out in 2 weeks. I don't, you know, it probably won't do anything, and it'll come and go, and it'll have its like Michael Mann head admirers, and then it'll kind of be gone. I sort of treasure the moment while people are still taking these films incredibly seriously and putting a lot of expectations on them and hoping that they live up to them. And in lots of ways, I think that these movies are very challenging to them. I felt the way you feel about
I don't think that The Master is in any way a minor film. I think it's a major, major accomplishment. But I was equally dumbfounded by what to think after The Master. Like, I don't.
Yes,
I think he
too.
makes movies that are very difficult to come out of and be like, thumbs up. It's only after like 10 times of seeing There Will Be Blood that I'm like, oh, I get it. That's one of the best movies of the last 20 years. You know.
I think that's right, and so I look forward to repeated viewings. I guess I like it. We spent a lot of time talking about him as a director. I really, really like and admire him as a writer almost as much as I like him as a director. And I really wanted to see his detective story, not so much Thomas Pynchon's.
Gotcha. Okay, that's an interesting point.
I felt his sensibilities genuflecting throughout the film, and I prefer it when they stomp all over the oil fields.
Let's quickly move on to television before we get out of here. There's a bunch of shows coming on this week.
Oh my god, dude, this is so ridiculous. Like, I thought we could have like a gentle glide into the new year.
No,
but
man.
There are over 22 shows debuting or returning in the next
spirit of Haley
3
Atwell
weeks.
compels you.
Oh god, it's just there's too much this month. It's overwhelming. And you know, I was able to squeeze a couple columns last month about how there was so little to watch in the fall. Well, now I got what I was asking for.
I would say, just obviously you have a skewed perspective on this, but I can't say that I'm like overwhelmed with anticipation for anything coming back. Like or that's coming on soon. So we've got Girls and Looking and Togetherness, right?
Well, okay, so we'll focus on this week because we do one of these shows every week.
Sure.
But later in the month, I mean, next week there's the return of Broad City, the return of Parks and Recreation. Later in the month, we have the return of my favorite show of 2014, The Americans. This week we have Marvel's Agent Carter premieres on Tuesday. It's pretty good. It's definitely better than Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. We have Empire premiering on Wednesday, and I'm very excited for you to check that out because I kind of liked it. I'll be writing about it this week. That is the hip-hop mogul King Lear soap opera with Terrence Howard and a living lightning bolt emoji known as Taraji P. Henson.
Let's definitely talk about that next week because I'm excited to check that out, and I think we'll have a lot of fun with that one.
People need to check that out. That's Wednesday on Fox. And then Banshee, one of my favorite shows, comes back for a third season on Friday on Cinemax. It is fantastic. New episodes are better than ever. But the most interesting thing about the week for me is that HBO on Sunday is coming out with its like winter lineup, and for the first time in I don't know how long, they don't have a drama to anchor the night. True Detective season 2 was pushed and delayed and is coming out later in the year, so they are just going with 3 comedies: Girls season 4, Looking season 2, and the debut of Togetherness. And I'll be writing about this later in the week. I find this night fascinating. I think that the emotional highs and lows and possibilities of these shows is actually richer than most dramas.
It's funny. Yeah, I was just going to say, you said it, you make it sound like they're going Cheers, Night Court, Cosby or something, but It's actually 3 dramedies.
Right. The big trend for 2015, I think, is the sudden awareness of the pliability and possibility of the half-hour form. I think that there are more interesting things being done in the half-hour form at the moment than in the hour-long form. And I think more and more people are starting to get hip to that. So where are we, these 3? Because you haven't seen them.
So this week, what's coming out? We got Agent Carter tomorrow night, right?
Agent Carter Tuesday, Empire Wednesday, Banshee Friday, and then also on Shameless is back, which show I like a lot on Showtime, and Episodes and all those other comedies that they keep airing that I can't believe are still on. But let's talk about Girls season 4 is what it is. I'm not super into it so far. I've only seen a couple. I'll be watching more before I write about it. Were you curious to see University of Iowa Writers Program skewered? Is that like high on your list?
I guess it's funny that we're talking about this. There's something about the 30-minute block that you're talking about that it feels like such a low commitment to me that I don't have like the same kind of like, no, sir, you must do better. You know what I mean? Like I would never be like, girls didn't stick the landing. You know, like I don't really.
Well, then it could also just, with a show like that, it's so schizophrenic. It could be something could be something incredible the next week.
I think you know what it is that I'm interested in is that for as much as it's a beloved show and for as much as she's obviously, people wait their whole lives to get the kind of creative control and platform that Lena Dunham has with Girls. I am surprised that I don't know if there's going to be a season 5 or not, but I am interested to see, whether or not there's a little bit of not attrition, but whether or not she chooses to do something else soon.
My feeling about this show at this point is I think she's a very talented writer, director, and performer. I would rather see her making movies again. Or making a different kind of TV show other than this one, developing something, co-writing something. I'm less and less interested in this the more like a TV show it becomes, in the sense of, oh, so are Ray and Shoshana getting back together? Like, that is not something I care about at all. And I like those performers. I like Sasha Mamet, and I like other guy. Oh, jeez, I'm blanking on his name. But that's where I am with that show. Looking, I don't know if you saw it all
I saw last
year.
Season, yeah.
It is a show about young gay men in San Francisco, and it's really taken a step up in the second season. I like the first season. I think this season is really, really strong. I think that it has more of a sense of place and just sort of like a 360-degree world than most shows can get in 4 or 5 seasons. It's immediately recognizable. The actors are really, really, really good, and they've made some strong choices to pick it up. The real interesting one, though, the one you need to watch this month and for the next 8 weeks, is Togetherness. It's the Duplass Brothers TV show.
Okay.
It's excellent. It is really good. And I was surprised by that, because the first few moments of it make it seem like it is yet another in TV's obsession, another installment in TV's obsession with the travails of upper middle class married people. Mm-hmm. Like, oh boy, it sure is hard to, like, this from the guy who couldn't make it through a movie, but it sure is hard to be married and have kids, and oh gosh, that's exhausting, and my problems are legit. It seems like it is that show. It is not that show, because it is 1,000 times more interesting, more interested in the world, and just kinder. It's about Mark Duplass and Melanie Lynskey play a married couple, and then at the same time, her sort of needy sister, played by the exceptional, on the wall Amanda Peet.
Yes.
She is this is her year. We are living in it. She is so good on this show. And she's just about to have another baby. Like, she's just crushing it on all corners of her life. She ends up crashing with them, and then his best friend, who was like basically was like the president of their school and a beloved guy and an athlete and an actor, then moved to LA to become an actor, and 15 years later is just bombed out and overweight and getting evicted. And it's just it's like that show on FX, Married. This is the show that wanted to be. Uh-huh. It is a really engaging, smart show. And so that made me optimistic for the year ahead. Okay, so we've got like 5 or 6 shows there. As a service to our listeners and to me, put them in order of like what I should make time for. Togetherness, Empire, Looking, Agent Carter, Girls. Interesting. Great. Yeah. Well, okay. Because we're going to talk about all these shows in the coming weeks. We just wanted to give people a preview. But there's no one listening to that list who's like, what is this, Girls? Yeah, I'll check it out for the first time on Sunday. But so Togetherness, Empire, Looking. Yeah. Agent Carter. Okay. Yeah. All right, man. Well, we're going to be back next week. We'll talk about Empire. I'm sure we'll talk about lots of other stuff. I'm so glad to be reunited. Me too. Are we going to keep putting things in lists? Is that who we are this year? Do you like that? Welcome to the Click Hole. That's awesome, man. I can't wait to be there with you. Bye. Good job, Baranski!
Thank you for listening to Grantland. To hear more Grantland shows in your earballs, subscribe to Grantland Sports and Grantland Pop Culture on iTunes. Or go to grantland.com and click on podcasts.